Would you be surprised if any Gulf country participated in an attack on Iran today?
Absolutely. Very definitely. The only thing that sprung to my mind, it seems like a remote possibility, but that an Israeli strike was flown from a position along the Gulf. That's not impossible, but it doesn't sound as though we have any real clarity, and there's confusion as to whether or not anything really happened. So, but the last thing I would do if I were in Qatar right now, or Bahrain, is launch a strike against Iran. What's to stop Iran from flattening the place? Doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I agree, especially Bahrain, tiny little Bahrain, or Kuwait. I would be surprised if Qatar participated in it, because Qatar was not struck by Iran, except it seems one strike yesterday, one missile, more of a warning shot. There was one new report, this came in now, according to Iranian media, Iranian military headquarters on the outskirts of Bushehr was hit by a projectile from the American Zionist enemy, according to IRNA, so Iranian media, citing the deputy political and security governor of Bushehr. The deputy says the attack resulted in no casualties. So that might have been, so that might have been a very, the air defenses, etc., and everyone's on edge responding to that little attack. But I would agree with you as well. I understand Bahrain and Kuwait would want to maybe consider building deterrence, but they're too small to build deterrence, like a chihuahua barking at a lion.
Exactly. Doesn't make any sense. I also don't know what to make of the word projectile. What is this, a lawn dart? Thrown from a ship or something. I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. But, these things happen in war. When I was in 91, this is actually before we had begun the offensive on the ground. We had some soldiers, troops that were very far forward, right on the border with Saudi Arabia. And, of course, you have to understand that these soldiers had never seen combat. They were all green at this point. So everything was fascinating and interesting and scary. And we got this report. I was awakened at, I think, something like 2 a.m. Sir, we have a report that so-and-so in G Troop is under bombardment. So I got up. I said, all right, let's go there and find out. Walked over to the Tactical Operations Center, this vehicle that we'd set up. And I walked in there and said, what's going on? They said, well, this so-and-so reports such and such. I said, did this come through the exec? No. Who the hell sent this report in? So get them on the phone. So who's sending this report up, and what do they say? They said the report, they said, sir, where we have air-to-ground bombs at our location. What the hell else are there other than air-to-ground bombs? Do we have anti-gravity bombs and people are throwing things into the air? So this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So then I said, wait a minute, get somebody else over there. Go up there, find out what the hell's going on, call me back. Well, it turned out they were watching A-10s that were flying over us. We had an A-10 squadron that ultimately flew over us for much of our offensive. And as they were pulling out, they were engaged by some anti-aircraft weapons or missiles. And so they had chaff that came out that looked like fireworks, and the chaff was designed to divert the missile. But these soldiers had never seen that before, and so they were convinced the chaff was meant for them and that they were under attack. So, anything is possible in war. And the first reports you get is always wrong. Just remember that.
Especially with so many parties involved in this war. You've got, remember, we had the reports earlier of Saudi and the UAE attacking Iran during the war. You've got Iran striking the Gulf. You've got the US and Iran being the two main players. You've got Israel jumping in whenever necessary. Then you got the Houthis that might pop in here and there. So there is a lot of parties involved in this war. It makes it very confusing.
How about those Balukis?
Yeah, exactly. You saw the strike. Did you see the strike on the railway yesterday? Have you had a chance to look at that?
You're talking about the one that connects to the Chinese and the Russians?
Yeah, the one next to the Turkmenistani border.
Yeah, and
that's interesting.
To me, that's very significant. That's worth
exactly. Well, I did save it to mention it to you. So the U.S. truck hit the Aktekke Khan railway bridge in Golestan. So that's a bridge. It's the node connecting Xi'an to Tehran, so Xi'an in China, in 10 to 15 days overland. China's Belt and Road running straight through Iran.
Mhm.
So it's Lisa, if you can, Stephanie now, the producer. Stephanie, I don't know if you can find the images. Lisa had them earlier to show them for the audience. But that was a railway line in Akala that, very close to Turkmenistan. But I don't know. So I don't know where it was attacked from. And also the damage is not that significant. So it seems more of a warning shot by the Americans. But it's interesting. It's very different to everything else we've seen. I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
Well, it's interesting to see the photographs. I did not have the photographs when I received the report, and the report said that they thought they would have this repaired in 24 hours. Now, maybe that's possible, but looking at the damage, it looks like it may take a little longer than that. And this, of course, also highlights something else, that the Belt and Road, which is enormously important to everybody in Eurasia, is new, and not all of the rail lines are completed, and there has been some discussion and debate about where you can send the rail lines. The Chinese would like to have sent rail lines down through Pakistan in greater numbers and greater volume. That hasn't happened because the Chinese are not confident of security along the railways. Now, that may change, but this one is important because it tells me that someone in Washington said, well, we'll do some damage to this and try to signal that we can isolate Iran. And also as a message to the Chinese, since we tend to treat the Belt and Road as a threat to us. I don't subscribe to that view, but then again, I'm not a China threat hawk. But I see the Belt and Road as the alternative to the United States Navy, which does represent a serious threat to China. We can shut down the whole Chinese coastline with our submarine fleet. Chinese know that. They've been through this before. Remember the Imperial Japanese Navy, before the Imperial Japanese Navy, the Royal Navy. So they don't want to be cut off. And so it becomes very important to build these overland routes. Now, as you can see from what you're showing up there right now, this is not going to change the game fundamentally. They'll repair the railway, and I think you'll see redundant railways show up in the near future. There are other ways to get into Iran as well across the Caspian. So it's not a strategic game changer, but I think you're making a valid point. It's a pretty serious message. I don't think it's a smart thing to do. I don't think it's going to change anything of consequence. But I think that there are people in the White House that probably thought in those terms. We've been down this road before. Well, hit so-and-so out there. That'll signal to them. We did this sort of thing in Vietnam along the border with China. We did it during the Korean War along the border with China. It didn't make any difference.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, I looked at it as a warning, but I'm like, warning of what exactly? Like, what does it really signal? Like, one of my guests who's part of the Belt and Road Institute, and he's been studying this for decades. He was on earlier today for the first time on the show, and he was explaining to me how significant this is, how this is a threat to U.S. hegemony. And you've studied history and you always reference history, Colonel. He started referencing how the corridors that were being built, I think from Russia to the Ottoman Empire, were seen as a threat by the British Empire before World War I. And that played a role in what eventually led to World War I. So that shows the significance of this Belt and Road Initiative by China as a threat, or at least the U.S. would perceive it as a threat to the hegemony and the hegemony in the region. And he mentioned a quote. He said this quote always stuck with him. A quote by Biden in 2022. He went to Saudi at the time in Riyadh in July 2022. So it's before October 7th. And he said during the Ukraine war, he said, "We will not leave a vacuum in this region, the Gulf, to be filled by Russia and China." So that was a statement that Biden made. So he referenced that statement as what this strike on the railway could include, as the Americans sending a warning to Iran and other countries part of the initiative. So that's some of my speculation, or his speculation.
Well, the railway that you referred to before the First World War was the Berlin to Baghdad railway.
Yeah.
And that was taken as a threat by the British Empire, who wanted a monopoly of control over the sea lanes. And they also didn't want oil and anything else for that matter of significance transported overland. They wanted to make sure that whatever was moved out of the Middle East, particularly with oil, would be at the mercy of the Royal Navy. And the Kaiser, who wasted a lot of money trying to build a German surface fleet, did have some strategic thinkers. And they said, look, we don't need a big fleet. We don't need, frankly, Bismarck was always opposed to colonies. So the Berlin to Baghdad railway came up. And that, of course, ran through the Ottoman Empire, of which Baghdad and Iraq, most of northern Iraq, well, in fact, all of Iraq was part of the Ottoman Empire at that stage. This time around, I don't think it's quite that significant. And I think there are people in Washington, as I said before, who are hopeful that this will be significant. In other words, they hope this frightens the Chinese or the Russians or something. It won't. It won't make any damn difference at all. We don't live in 1910. We're in a very different world today. And you have all of these countries and states across Central Asia who have an interest in participating in this Belt and Road project. They all stand to profit in some way. It's kind of an annoyance for the Chinese. We could do it much more easily across North America because we all speak the same language. We all have one law from the Atlantic to the Pacific. I wish we would do something similar to what the Chinese have done in Eurasia on the North American continent. I've written about that. I published about that. It's on my website. People can see it. It's called the Golden Spike Program. And it basically goes back to our railroad connectivity across the continent. So bottom line is, yes, that was the one strike that popped out when I looked at the list as being significant. I know, no doubt they'll repair it. It's not going to dampen Chinese enthusiasm for supporting Iran. Come on, wake up. They have a very good relationship with the Iranians on the basis of petroleum and a number of other products. So do the Indians. So the notion that you're going to do something like this, and this is going to warn everybody that things can get worse, it's not going to help our position at all. But there are some, we have a sort of late 20th century military establishment, and we have an early 20th century thinking establishment, if you want to dignify it with that word, in Washington, D.C. That's our problem.
Yeah, and also it could be, there might be some intelligence that we obviously don't know about. Maybe the Americans know some air defense batteries are being delivered through that railway in the next couple of days or on their way, and they struck it as a warning for the Chinese or for Iran not to import them. I'm just saying there could be more to it as well than something.
Most of the air and missile defense capability and radars and so forth, even missiles themselves, have been flown in by the Chinese.
Ah, okay.
Massive,
yeah,
massive.
Oh, yeah.
A very
True, yeah.
airlift on the scale of only something that we historically have been able to do. Chinese can do it now. So, the bottom line is somebody's trying to say something about the Chinese or to the Chinese in connection with Iran. We got that. It's not going to change anything. That's my point.
Yeah. Since we're talking about the strikes, and there's no information on the strikes today, everything's quiet now on the explosions we heard earlier. It's just very bizarre, very, very bizarre. I'm sure we'll get reports of it. Similar to the attacks by Saudi and the UAE, we only got reports about it weeks later after the ceasefire. We'll probably hear about this in a few days. We'll start hearing leaks come out. But I haven't asked you yet your thoughts on the escalations in the last 48 hours. So you had Iran attack those 3 ships going through the Omani side, and the US just went ballistic. They've attacked in the last 2 days. It was 14 times the level of attacks we saw the last 2 times. They retaliated against the strikes on the ships going through the Omani side. So the Iranian strikes beforehand in the last couple of weeks. So it's significantly more, according to the New York Times, about 14 times more. There's kind of 2 schools of thought here. One of them is the ceasefire dead, or the MOU is dead, as Trump has said, and this is the beginning of a continuation of the war. And the other one, which I'm in that camp, at least for now, is that this is just the 2 sides, a bit of a power struggle between the both. Iran saying we're going to control the Strait of Hormuz, and the US trying to break that, trying everything they can to break that. And the Iranians' retaliation kind of confirms that, because they're not escalating. They're like, we're going to strike Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan and keep our control of the Strait of Hormuz. And today, the ships are going through the Iranian side. So they seem to be playing the long game there. What's your analysis of this escalation, and how worrying is it?
I think perhaps the first observation is that Iran has gone to a full war footing. In other words, they are now mobilized for war, total war against us. Are we mobilized for total war against them? No. We have a fraction of our military capability. Now, most of the fleet is currently involved in this. And there's something interesting that should be brought up, and that is that the United States Navy has now officially admitted that they have more launchers and more launch tubes for missiles than they have missiles to fire. So what are we doing? I don't know, but I suspect that we're pulling assets, missiles, from other locations, other theaters, and concentrating them in the Indian Ocean and potentially the Mediterranean. But I think that's an important point to keep in mind. Iran is in a total war mode, full war footing. Russia is very close to a full war footing and could go to a total war mobilization state very rapidly. Both of them are mobilizing their scientific industrial base, their population, everything. We are not. And Trump has failed miserably to extract more performance from our so-called 5 major defense industries. So I guess, and I think it's an important observation, because the most important question is not what are we doing, because I can tell you we don't know what we're doing. We have no coherent military strategy because we have no attainable military political objective. We're back to the problem we began with. We have 93 million people living in an area the size of Western Europe, surrounded on 3 sides by mountains and on 1 side by impassable desert. Everything of real importance is a long, long flight for U.S. aircraft or for missiles. So what are we trying to achieve? We've given up on regime change. We've decided that the most that we can do is insult and offend the people of Iran and everyone who happens to be a Shiite Muslim by attacking during the funeral of the leader of Shia Islam, who is being laid to rest in near Mashhad, right? Dumb idea. We should have waited. We should have demonstrated some sort of sensitivity. Instead, we chose to insult everyone. This is hardened opposition to us. So what's your objective? If you can't bring the regime down, what are you bombing to get? You think the more bombs you drop, the more likely the Iranians are to jump into little rubber boats with white flags and say, we're through, we're finished, you can have the Persian Gulf? That's not likely. So why are we attacking Bushehr? Because there's a nuclear power station there? Is that designed to endear us to the Iranians, or do we want a large nuclear accident and poisonous radioactivity all over the region? I mean, what are we doing? No one has explained it. What the hell is the objective? Well, I know what the Israeli objective is, and I'm afraid that's the objective that we're pursuing: the total destruction of Iran. I said that to you months ago. What do the Israelis want? The destruction of Iran. End of story. We have no interest in that, never have. So what are we doing? We're trying to destroy Iran. Why would some man stand up who is in charge in the United States and say, I'm going to destroy a civilization in one night? Sheer unadulterated lunacy. We saw a glimpse of rationality with Donald Trump when he was in Versailles in Paris. And what did he say? He said, we've got to get this war over with. This could send the world into a global depression. That's why I signed the MOU. Well done, Mr. President. Thank you. That was the most intelligent action he's taken since this nonsense began. What's happened then? What's changed? Have we decided, oh, the hell with the world, send the world into a global depression? Can we do that? Well, what are the 3 things we ought to be focused on? Number 1 is oil. I don't know what the price is right now. A few hours ago, it was $78 a barrel. What is it now? Is it above 78? I think it'll go to 120 and 150 in the next few weeks. What about this business of restoring or resupplying the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? Remember Vice President Vance? Well, you got to understand, this is just a pause. We just want to refill everybody's oil reserves and get everybody healthy, and then we'll go back to war. Well, what's happened there? We've thrown that out. What about this thing called inflation? Inflation in the United States is getting worse. It's getting worse across the Western world. Wars breed inflation. This is only going to make matters worse. And then finally, it's time to look at the United States bond market.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
Look at the interest rates for the 10-year bond. That's the bellwether. Everybody who's an expert in the area told me to say, Doug, if we hit 5%, it's financial Armageddon. We go under. And it's climbing.
Yeah. Yeah, we did a deep dive. I think you did a piece on it as well. And we did a deep dive on it in our last discussion. I've got some information to just, because you started off by Iran is preparing for war. And there's indications of that. So the Iranian armed forces, as of yesterday, entered their highest rate of alert, highest state of alert, and moved to wartime conditions. Also, there's reports of special forces moving to the Kurdistan, Iraqi Kurdistan region as well, worried about potential infiltration from there, which is bizarre to me. The Kurds can't do much in Iran. But then the more important one is yesterday, Tehran, according to the tanker trackers, they shipped out 10 million barrels of crude oil and fuel overnight. Massive amount of oil shipped out in case there is an American blockade or a continuation of the war. Similar to what we saw before this war. Remember the floating reserves? They had all these ships out there. So I saw those reports this morning, and I had someone close to me say, look, is it looking bad? Because I've been more on the optimistic side for a while. And I said, look, it wasn't great in the last 48 hours, but these indications are not good. But I want to give you a theory and let me know if you, by the way, Axios also put out a report that the White House is bracing for a weeks long fight with Iran. So this is not the end of it. Is it possible this is not a plan to continue a full-blown war? And the reason I don't think the US wants to continue war is for the reasons that we've talked about: depleted munitions, bond market, the economy, inflation, oil, strategic petroleum reserves, political suicide for Trump, allies being upset. All these different reasons make it, if you're looking at this from a pragmatic lens, just makes it such a stupid idea to continue the war. So could this be just literally the US trying to force Iran with a carrot and stick approach not to charge a fee in the Strait of Hormuz, saying, hey, we'll lift the sanctions, we'll unfreeze the assets, like Axios reported a few days ago, just don't charge a fee in the Strait of Hormuz, but if you don't accept, we'll bomb you. And Iran's just saying, we're going to charge a fee, you could do whatever you want, we're not budging. Could we just see that power dynamic playing out, or just more likely something more significant?
The Turks just raised the fees for the Bosphorus passage through the Dardanelles by 15%. And what happened after World War I, in which the Turks were defeated, or at least they were on the losing side, they retained control of the Dardanelles. Persia or Iran is going to retain control of the Gulf. End of discussion. Forget it. You know, why did they hit all these bases again in these last targets? They blasted the living daylights out of bases they've hit previously, only made the damage much worse. Why? What's the message? We're not coming back. It's over. Our role in this region is at an end. Our hegemony over the region is at an end. No, there will be no negotiation over tolls or anything else in connection with the entrance to the Persian Gulf. Forget it. It's done. And you got to go back to the big issue again. What compels us to quit? In other words, that's where we are. The Iranians take the position, we're going to hold what we've got. We're going to defend ourselves. We'll use every missile at our disposal. We are in a war to the last missile. So we'll use whatever we have until we don't have any, number one. Number two, we're in this war until the financial crisis at home is so bad we can't continue. That's how this thing ends. There will be no agreement. I don't think anybody's going to sign anything. I think all of a sudden people are going to say, look, this is a stinker. Eventually, you're going to have people from the Senate, from the House, from industry who crowd into the Oval Office and say, listen, Donald, it's time to end this. It's not going to work. Pull the plug on this. If you don't pull the plug on it, you're not going to last, because we can't tolerate this. Now, when does that happen? I don't know, but I think it's coming between now and the end of the year. He'll be lucky to survive. I said before, if he stops the war after this last round, before we began the new one, I said he can survive. All he has to do is sort of quietly withdraw, postpone any serious negotiations on big issues, get the strait open, demonstrate our sensitivity to the needs of our friends, allies around the world, forget the rest of it. Then he could stay in office. He's now backed out of that. He said, the hell with the world. The hell with everybody. I'm going to break Iran. I'm going to win this. That's where he is. It's back to this problem that he has with the parent-child relationship. With him, everyone's a child and he's in charge. Remember, I went over Roy Cohn's rules.
Yeah,
that's the inevitable outcome. So he says, well, I told them, they could, they have to do this or there's no deal. Oh, they called me last night. They're desperate for a deal. Yeah, okay. Smoke some more crack. They're not desperate for a deal. You're desperate for a deal, and everybody knows it. So what can he do? Can he stand up and be the man we know he's not? Take responsibility for this thing and end it? No. So he's just going to hammer away and hammer away and hammer away. And eventually the other factors that you and I have been discussing will descend. They'll all converge on him and compel us to leave. And I don't think he'll make it. I think he'll be booted from office.